welcome everybody. I'm so thrilled as the literary director at the library that there are so many people who care about old books. So the great majority of our books in this lineup this year and every year are really new books. So new translations bring new life to old books, right? So one of the things that we were thinking, me and my department, when we came up with this pairing is that we have seen in American publishing a huge popularity recently in novels that are titled something like Circe or Medea. And so people seem to be looking to the ancient world for answers to questions that are still plaguing us. And we did call this panel Ancient Wisdom. I don't know how much wisdom is going to be dispensed today. I mean, a religious text, the Quran, is a sort of different question about wisdom than a text like the Iliad. But these are two excellent translators, and they have worked really hard on these books. And I was a classics major, so I want to ask them how they did it. I was also the only moderator strong enough to lift both of these books in one hand, so I assigned this panel to myself. So I want to start with a few questions that both of them can respond to, and we're going to leave time for your questions, 10 to 15 minutes at the end of this event. And as he said, the microphones are right here. So let's sort of orient everybody with what you all have done. Emily, you say in the introduction to the Iliad that you spent 6 years on this. Did you expect it would take that long?
I signed a 6-year contract, so I hoped that I would get it done in 6 years. I mean, I thought it was very likely that I would end up having to beg the publishers to let me have another 6 years, because it's difficult work, translation. It's not. I think people who haven't done it may think it's difficult because reading the original might be difficult, but that's not actually the primary thing that's difficult. The difficult thing is figuring out all the words to use to recreate the effects of this extraordinary, very alien ancient poem.
Yeah. And Rafi, what about you? How long did it take to translate the Quran?
It took us about 10 years.
Okay.
And I think...
And I do want to, sorry, there is a co-translator, Bruce Lawrence, and I want him to stand up. Yeah, so... and to that point, let me ask, how did you all split up the work?
Actually, I was going to mention that a very important part of this project was collaboration with Bruce Lawrence, who is one of the foremost Islamic scholars in the world. And I was very honored and I was very fortunate to be able to work with him, and also Miriam Cook, who is an Arabist, and also, of course, my wife, Yasmin. But I think initially we were very ambitious, and I think we thought, Bruce, we would get it done in like 4 years. And then we realized what we'd got ourselves into. And it was a much longer project because, thanks mostly to Bruce, we arranged a number of conferences in various parts of the world to get feedback from all kinds of people, native Arabic speakers, Islamic scholars, Arab students, American students, English language poets. And all of that was so it really was a kind of collaborative effort. And because of that, the need for that collaboration, I think it just took more time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So both of you are doing innovative things with these translations, and they both involve poetry. And Emily, in your case, you chose iambic pentameter for the English translation. Tell us about why you made that decision.
So one of the big reasons I signed up to do first the Odyssey and then the Iliad in the first place was that I felt in the course of the decades that I've been teaching both these and other ancient verse texts in translation to undergraduates, that there was something really missing in the fact that most 20th and 21st century translations into English didn't have meter. And that my students, I was telling them, this is verse, and it has a particular rhythm in the original, but they had to take that on faith, because all of the different translations I tried were either free verse or prose. So they didn't sort of feel in their bones when they read it out loud, this has a rhythm, and it's traditional within the Anglophone tradition in ways that might be analogous to dactylic hexameter, just signaling traditionalness and read aloud ability or performability, which is what it would feel like in archaic Greek contexts.
Right. It is a very readable translation. Rafi, so do I understand correctly that your and Bruce's translation is the first translation of the Quran into English verse? Is that?
I would not say the very first, because I think something similar has been attempted by Michael Sells, who, but I don't think he did the entire Quran. And to be honest, we stole one or two ideas from him. I think Thomas Cleary, and even one or two earlier translations like Yusuf Ali, they're kind of in verse, you know. So I would not say it's the very first one, but I think it's the first one where produced by collaboration between an Islamic scholar and an English scholar. And I think I would make an important distinction. For any Muslims here, they will know that the Quran distinguishes itself from poetry, doesn't call itself poetry. So we were careful not to say in English poetry. And so when we say verse, we follow the actual verses of the Quran, which are independent, and they're numbered independently. But also, it's a kind of acknowledgement that we try to capture some of the poetic effects of the Quran, as in the pauses, the alliteration, the assonance, the rhymes, and so forth.
Yeah. You know, to be a translator for massive texts like these, you both have to be champions for the books that you choose to translate. In both of your cases, what makes you feel so passionate about the Iliad or the Quran that you wanted to take it on and spend 6 years or 10 years?
I mean, the Homeric poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are poems I feel like I've sort of spent my whole life living in, and every time I turn back to them, I see them anew, and they help me see life anew. I mean, there's this extraordinary humanity in Homer. There were these sort of proto-dramatic qualities. They were composed before drama as such existed, but there's this profound empathy for all the characters, and this sort of profound sense of what does it mean to be human, which is defined by being mortal and not being divine, not being the immortal deities, and also what does it mean to be an individual person within a larger community. And those questions just seem to me just eternally resonant and relevant for anything I'm living through in my own personal life and anything that our culture is confronting. I mean, and also the way that the Iliad in particular is so intense in its feelings, especially the feelings of grief and rage, which are still very much with us in our own culture and our own lives nowadays.
Right. Rafi, what about you? I mean, you didn't know it would take 10 years, but you must have cared about the Quran quite a bit.
Yeah, because for my whole life, I probably have been what post-colonial theorists call a marginal person. I don't really belong. I've never belonged anywhere to any culture. And so, you know, as I grew up, I found that Islam was an important part of my identity, even though as I grew up in England, I was actually ashamed. You know, I was ashamed of my color, I was ashamed of my religion, I was ashamed of my culture, and it took a long time to kind of get back to looking at who I might be, you know. And so it's kind of been an ambition of mine to translate the Quran into English verse from a very early age. And as Bruce would tell you, that there's so many different translations of the Quran, but most of them have been produced by Arabists, and which is not to denigrate them. A lot of them are excellent, you know, and a lot of them have very substantial virtues. But we wanted to produce something that people would actually want to read. So, similar to what Emily's saying, and something that would invite people into the substance of the text. Because sadly, most Muslims in the world don't understand Arabic, and sadly, most people in the world, including most Muslims, do not know what is in the Quran. And so we have a lot of misunderstanding today about this book. And I think one of the ways in which we can remedy this, this widespread dearth of knowledge, is by trying to produce a text which people might actually enjoy and invite them in.
Yeah. Well, that's why we put on this book festival, right? We all believe in books. So I've asked both of them to choose some passages and to read some of those passages in the original language and then their English translation. So I'm going to ask Emily to read first from not the entire Iliad.
Not the entire Iliad, no, I promise I won't. And so first I'm just going to do the very beginning, first in the original and then in my translation. And I was emphasizing already, as Claire was already saying, that my translation is in iambic pentameter. The original is in dactylic hexameter, so it's a different rhythm, but I hope that even if you don't yet know ancient Greek, that you can hear that it has a rhythm, it has assonance and alliteration, it's designed for oral performance, and it has these dramatic qualities. Meninae thea pelea do ekeleos, ulomanen, he muria kaio isalgi atheka, polas difthimus psuka saidi proiapsin, hero on, autuste heloria tukekunesin, oio noisite daita, dios de teleo tobule, exudeta prota diaste tenere santa, atre desta anaxandron, cae dios Achillius. Okay, so now I'm going to do my translation, which is inevitably going to sound not as good as Real Homer, which that's just something which you have to take on board if you're going to translate a text as great as that. Goddess, sing of the cataclysmic wrath of great Achilles, son of Peleus, which caused the Greeks immeasurable pain and sent so many noble souls of heroes to Hades and made men the spoils of dogs, a banquet for the birds. And so the plan of Zeus unfolded, starting with the conflict between great Agamemnon, lord of men, and glorious Achilles. And now I'm going to do a slightly longer passage, but just in my translation, right? Is that right? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Look forward
okay. So I want to make sure I'm getting the choreography of the conversation right. So I'm going to read, I know that some people may not have read the Iliad or may not have read it recently, I'm not sure that you need the whole story so far. This is from the middle of the poem. The story so far, as you already gathered from that first 7 lines, is that 2 Greek commanders have had a huge quarrel with each other, Achilles and Agamemnon. Achilles has begged his sea goddess mother Thetis to allow for restoration of his honor he's going to sit out of the battlefield, refuse to fight for the Greeks, let the Greeks be massacred by the Trojan hero Hector while he's doing nothing, to demonstrate they need Achilles in order to get anywhere. Zeus has signed off on this plan temporarily, such that the Trojan hero Hector will get to the Greek ships. But there are divine plots within plots, such that Zeus's wife / sister Hera wants the Trojans massacred as fast as possible, so she's not at all on board with this plan to delay the massacre of the Trojans and the destruction of Troy. So Hera comes up with a plan to co-opt the special superpowers of Aphrodite, which are the powers of seduction. She puts on the super sexy face cream and the best earrings and the best dress and shows up to speak to Zeus, pretending that she has nothing on her mind except just popping off on a very virtuous errand. And of course, she in fact is also co-opting the strategy of Zeus, god of strategy, who turns out to be no good at strategy when it comes to shout-out lines to his wife. So I'm going to read this passage, which is, I think it can be surprising to realize both how dramatic and entertaining the Iliad is, and that in this poem about death and grief and mortality, there are also funny passages. And yet, this passage shows you also the intertwining of the divine with the mortal, that something that's funny on a divine level can be very much not funny once it gets to human beings killing each other. So this is Hera showing up to talk to Zeus. Meanwhile, Hera quickly came up to the peak of Ida, Gargaron, and Zeus, who gathers clouds together, saw her, and at the sight of her, desire enfolded his cunning mind, as when they first made love and went to bed together secretly, so that their loving parents would not know. He stood in front of her and said to her, "Hera, what do you want? Why have you come down from Olympus to this place? You brought no horses and no chariot to ride." Deceitfully, the goddess Hera answered, "Husband, I am about to go and visit the limits of the earth where food is grown, to see the origin of all the gods, Ocean and Mother Tethys. In their house they cared for me and nurtured me, and now I plan to visit them and stop their quarrel. They have been holding back from one another, and for a long time they have not made love. Anger has fallen on their hearts. My horses are standing at the foothills of Mount Ida, where many creeks and fountains flow. They will carry me over land and over water. But I have come out here from Mount Olympus because you would be angry with me later if I had failed to tell you I was going to visit Ocean, where the streams run deep." Then Zeus, who gathers clouds together, answered, "You can go later on that journey, Hera, but now let us enjoy some time in bed. Let us make love. Such strong desire has never suffused my senses or subdued my heart for any goddess or for any woman, as I feel now for you. Not even when I lusted for the wife of Ixion and got her pregnant with Pirithous, a counselor as wise as any god. Not even when I wanted Danae, the daughter of Acrisius, a woman with pretty ankles, and I got her pregnant with Perseus, the best of warriors. Not even when I lusted for the famous Europa, child of Phoenix, and I fathered Minos on her and godlike Rhadamanthus. Not even when I wanted Semele, or when in Thebes I lusted for Alcmene, who birthed heroic Heracles, my son, and Semele gave birth to Dionysus, the joy of mortals. And not even when I lusted for the goddess Queen Demeter, who has such beautiful, well-braided hair. Not even when I wanted famous Leto. Not even when I wanted you, yourself. I never wanted anyone before as much as I want you right now. Such sweet desire for you has taken hold of me." Deceitfully, the goddess Hera answered, "Terrible, terrifying son of Cronos, what have you said? You want to make love now, upon the peaks of Ida, in a place where everything is visible all round? But what if one of the immortal gods witnesses us up there in bed together and goes away and tells the other gods? I could not get up from the bed and go back to your house. It would be very shameful. But if this really is your heart's desire, you have a chamber which our dear son built. Let us go lie down there, if you are really so tempted by the thought of making love." Then Zeus, the god who gathers clouds, replied, "Do not be frightened that some god or human might see us, Hera. I will wrap around us a golden cloud, so we cannot be seen, even by Helios the sun, whose vision is sharpest and whose light sees everything." With this, the son of Cronos took his wife into his arms, and underneath them both the bright earth grew fresh grass and dewy clover and thick, soft hyacinth, which kept them up above the ground. On this plant bed they lay, surrounded by the lovely golden cloud, which sprinkled shining drops of dew upon them. Then Zeus the father slept in peace, up high on Gargaron, subdued by sleep and sex, and held his wife enfolded in his arms. So then, meanwhile, Sleep, who turns out to be a god, dashes down to tell Poseidon that the Greeks can massacre the Trojans now, because Zeus is distracted. When every man was dressed in shining bronze, they charged ahead, led by the god of earthquakes, Poseidon. In his sturdy hand he held a deadly, sharp-edged sword that shone like lightning. It is decreed that nobody may fight this terrifying blade in bitter battle. Fear seizes every man when it appears. And meanwhile, on the other side, great Hector marshaled the Trojan troops. Blue-haired Poseidon and noble Hector pulled the rope of war, creating an intense and dreadful conflict. One led the Trojans and one helped the Greeks. The sea surged up towards the huts and ships, The armies clashed with a tumultuous cry, louder than roaring of the waves on shore when cruel blasts of Boreas have stirred the deepest water, louder than the rumble of blazing fire that leaps to burn a forest within the thickets of the mountainside, louder than wind that shrieks through lofty oak trees, which roars the loudest when it rages most. Louder than all of these, the Greeks and Trojans let out their terrifying screams and cries as they attacked each other. Shining Hector aimed with his spear at Ajax, who had turned to face him head on. Hector did not miss. He struck the straps across the chest of Ajax, which held his shield and silver-studded sword. The son of Telamon had tied him on, and they protected his soft flesh. Then Hector was angry that his sharp spear caused no damage. Frustrated, he rejoined his group of comrades. But mighty Ajax, son of Telamon, hit him as he retreated with a stone. Numerous rocks, the swift ship's anchor stones, rolled at the fighter's feet, and Ajax seized one of those stones and hurled it straight at Hector over his shield rim, and it hit his chest under his throat and sent him whirling round, just as a spinning top is struck and spun, as when the father Zeus strikes down and fells an oak tree by the roots, and as it falls, there is a strange, uncanny smell of sulfur, and anyone who sees it is afraid. So swiftly Hector tumbled to the ground, the mighty fighter fallen in the dust.
Thank you. So, Emily, let me ask you a few questions. You, as you mentioned, you had read different translations of the Iliad. You'd obviously read it in the Greek. You had taught it. The way that you inhabited those different characters, did you, even with all your knowledge of the poem, did you find yourself rooting for certain characters, wanting to know how it ended, feeling the characters? I mean, that's part of being a translator. You actually care for the characters.
You care for the characters, and I mean, I think there are even sort of proto-novelistic elements of sort of trying to figure out. I mean, I've been living with these characters for decades. I mean, I first read Homer in Greek as an undergraduate, so it wasn't that this was my. If I hadn't had a whole vision about the characters and how to do the poem, I wouldn't have signed up to do it at all. But I certainly felt that there were these elements of. I kind of have a vision for how Hera should sound, but how do I do that in English? And so one of the big things that I wanted to bring to these translations was a sense, which I think is there in the Greek, that the characters don't all sound the same as each other. I think that's something that Homeric scholarship over the last 20 years or so has really taught us, is that Achilles has a very distinctive way of speaking, of inhabiting the world. Helen doesn't sound the same as Penelope, say. I mean, these characters are really clearly individuated, and yet there's this real empathy for each of them. I mean, I very much didn't feel it's my job to pick favorites, and I think Homer doesn't pick favorites. Yeah. And I felt that in the process of doing this, even characters that I might have thought, when I first read these poems when I was a teenager, I didn't initially take to Agamemnon very much, which I think many readers don't think he's presented all that sympathetically. But over the course of dwelling with these poems over so many decades, including with the translation, I really feel even for Agamemnon. I feel deep compassion for him, and I think the poem does too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's about picking sides. I think it's about just really feeling for this is how this character feels in this moment and how they sound.
Inhabiting them.
Yeah.
Not to denigrate previous translators of the Iliad, but was there anything that you felt you wanted to correct with your translation?
I mean, I wouldn't have signed on to do them at all if I hadn't felt I could do something that would be legitimate and responsible about the original and also different. I mean, the main thing that I thought from the start, as I was emphasizing, was metricality. And also, as I was emphasizing just now, the proto-dramatic qualities. Yeah. I mean, I felt that in some of the translations I've used for teaching, that there was either they go for a sort of quote-unquote literal style, which usually means using unnatural word order, so it doesn't sound as fluent or beautiful or gripping as the original does. And I felt that's the kind of betrayal in making Homer sound either awkward, because the original doesn't sound awkward. It sounds fluent and beautiful, and it also sounds gripping and not boring, whereas some of those translations are kind of a slog to read.
Yeah.
When I tried using them in the classroom, the students would show up either having not done the reading at all or not having understood it. And that's not the case if you're really immersed in the original. But then there were other translations that seemed to me to go too far towards using American idioms and sort of substituting the metaphors of contemporary American English or some other English for the metaphors that are in the original. So I wanted to convey some kinds of alienness about the original, but not present it in a sort of emotionally or narratively distancing way that, again, felt to me not truthful to what I love most about Homer.
Yeah. Rafi, do you want to read for us?
Excuse me. Well, I'm very honored to share a stage with Emily Wilson, but I have to say she is a tough act to follow.
You can do it. You got it.
I mean, her English accent is even more English than mine. Okay, so this is probably the most famous passage in the Quran. It's generated much commentary, and it's a rather beautiful passage about light. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. Okay. Okay, so this is the translation of Bruce and myself. God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. His light is a parable of a niche which holds a lamp, the lamp enclosed in a glass, the glass which glows like a gleaming star, lit from an olive tree blessed, whose soil is neither east nor west. Its very oil would shine forth, though untouched by fire, light upon light. God guides to his light whom he will. He strikes parables for humankind, for God is knower of all things.
I think you're going to read some more, but I want to, that passage is so beautiful that I just want to stop and ask you about it now. The way that you're, in Bruce's translation, light, you're sort of hitting the reader with that thought over and over, and there's the word lamp and light. Yes. It's just so beautiful, and I guess I turn again to the question of, when I was translating in college, it's a very solitary activity, and the passage is so beautiful. I can't imagine how two people would agree on the right words. How did you all break up the work of translating?
Well, Bruce was simple. The funny thing about Bruce is everyone who ever talks about him says that he's an amazing person. And it's no exaggeration, he really is. Mm-hmm. He's the most wonderful person to work with. And it's not just because he agrees with everything I say. But he, basically the way we split it up was, because he's the Islamic scholar. So I would look at the Arabic of a particular surah, and I would do a very literal translation. And Bruce and Miriam, they were the first people who would look at it, and Yasmin, and they would tell me if I'd made any mistakes, or they would make suggestions for improvements. And actually, the first time we sent all this to our editor, Pete Simon, he didn't particularly like it. He said, this is not poetic. I said, well, Pete, this is just the first draft. We wanted to do a literal translation to make sure that it was accurate. And then what we came up with afterwards was very different. And, Miriam gave me some very good ideas for that. And, other poets, English language poets. But just as Emily was saying, that she was kind of, I know you said, Emily, in one of your introductions, you struggled. First, you tried to do it in dactylic hexameter like the original, and you didn't like the results. And for me, for us also, it was a struggle, because I know you went with iambic pentameter, which is the natural kind of rhythm of the English language. But when we tried to go with iambic verse, it didn't quite work, and it took me a long time to realize that it might be better to translate the Quran into a more accentual verse, where you don't count every syllable, you just count the beats. So you were just saying at the beginning, Clay, about how we get the beats here. So in the Arabic, it's Allahu Nurus Samawati wal Ard. And so we try to capture those beats. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. But if you count the syllables, it won't scan. So.
Yeah. Do you want to read another?
Sure. Passage? And I chose these next passages because a lot of people are unaware that the Quran considers itself to be a continuation of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Jesus is one of our prophets. Moses is a hero in the Quran. Abraham is called a friend of God, Khalilullah. And and I don't want to misinform you. Of course, there are criticisms in the Quran of Jews and Christians, but it criticizes them for not following their religion. Okay, and even as it criticizes some Muslims who don't follow their religion. And so I think it's important to see or to understand that Muhammad, peace be upon him, regarded himself, and he's regarded by Muslims as the last in a long line of messengers. And also in the chapter, there's a whole, in the Quran, there's a whole chapter devoted to the Virgin Mary. And she is considered the highest of all women. And that is by Muslims, right? And so here are a few passages which try to illustrate this continuity and community. And of course, the we is spoken by God, right? We revealed the Torah to Moses, bearing guidance and light. In their footsteps, we sent Jesus, son of Mary, verifying the Torah that came before him. We gave to him the gospel, bearing guidance and light, verifying the Torah that came before him. Guidance and counsel for those mindful of God. And we revealed the book with the truth to you, prophet, verifying the earlier book, preserving it. For each of you, we made a law and a path. This is a kind of expression of diversity in the Quran and inclusivity. For each of you, we made a law and a path. If God had willed, he could have made you one people, but he would test you in what he has granted you. So compete in good works. All of you shall return to God. He alone shall enlighten you about the things you dispute. And there's one other passage which is actually repeated twice. It occurs twice in the Quran, verbatim. And this is instructing Muslims to say, we believe in God, what has been revealed to us, and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes, and what was given to Moses, Jesus, and the prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction among any of them, and to him we submit our will.
So let me ask you, Rafi. I mean, the Quran, certainly since at least 9/11, but I think before then, the Quran has been a sort of contested text in America. And you may have sort of alluded to this earlier, but what do you wish that American non-Muslims knew about the Quran that maybe we don't know?
Actually, to answer that, could I read one more passage?
Yes.
Because this has the answers.
Okay, great.
So this is, again, a very famous passage, and it basically is a nice summary of Islamic behavior, what a Muslim is supposed to do. I know you probably have heard of the 5 pillars of Islam, like a profession of faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. But this is like a more nuanced and poetic expression of those. Righteousness does not reside in turning your faces toward east or west. Rather, it resides in those who believe in God and the last day, in the angels, the book, and the prophets, who give their wealth despite their love of it, for kin, for orphans, the needy, the traveler, for those who ask, and for freeing slaves, who are steadfast in prayer, who give in charity, keeping their covenants, who suffer in patience, hardship, pain, and times of conflict. They are the ones who speak truth, and they are the ones mindful of God. And so, there's a couple of things here. One of the principles I love about Christianity is what I think of as its inwardness. When Jesus says, don't pray on the street corners like the scribes and the Pharisees to be seen of men. They have had their reward. And so the idea is Jesus wants you, it's not enough to obey the law externally. You have to internalize it. You have got to want to do the right thing. And the same in Islam as well. Righteousness is not in your, we might have to follow certain rituals, but that's not enough for righteousness. Your heart has got to be pure as well. But the other thing I love about Jesus is that he was obsessed with poverty. And the choice he gives you is not between God and the devil, but between God and mammon. And mammon comes from mammonia, right, which means wealth. So the choice that Jesus gives you is between God and money, right? And the Prophet Muhammad also was obsessed with poverty. He prayed always to be among the poor. And so there's a great emphasis in Islam on charity, on giving to the poor and helping the poor. And it's these kind of things that I would like people to know about Islam.
Thank you. Let me ask both of you a question that I think might be, frustratingly broad for you all, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is that, you all have spent long days in the granular details of the text that you're translating from. When you, at the end of the day, when you sit up and you sort of rejoin our modern world, can you talk about some ways in which the worlds that you depict in your books how are those ancient worlds totally different from ours. And I guess the other side of that question is how are those two worlds exactly the same?
Right. They're always both, right? I mean, I think part of the purpose of engaging deeply, I mean, including in translation with any pre-modern text, is that it shakes us out of the provincialism of modernity, where we're always just tuned into the latest news cycle, and we have an idea that, you know, that humanity is sort of synonymous with modern. I mean, I was kind of frustrated with that so many of the headlines about my translation were, look, this is a modern translation, which I kind of thought it's not particularly modern to use a traditional poetic meter, and actually it's not that modern. But I think that relies on an idea that modern means interesting, or modern means realistic human beings who have feelings we might care about, or that the narrative engages us in some way. And that's actually not exclusive to modernity. And you know, pre-modern humans mattered too, and were equally human. And yet, these humans have totally different social structures, and totally different food ways, and totally different ways of, you know, the religion in the Homeric poems is totally different from in the Quran, totally different from any existing modern religious practices. And then even on the level, I mean, I was talking before about, you know, one of the things I wanted to do differently, if possible, was to try to pay attention to metaphor, including when the metaphor is weird. So, for instance, all the metaphors that have to do with how do feelings affect people, we tend to think in terms of you know, post-Freud psychological ideas about how we have our feelings. Homeric feelings are represented in very different ways. They're very physicalized. Sleep comes across the body. Like, anger is a physical thing which is stirred up in the body. The living body is a collection of knots, which gets untied when we die. All of those are alien ways of thinking about it. We may think in terms of, you know, body and spirit, and that doesn't really apply in Homer.
Yeah.
So all of those things are very alien, and yet then once you can sort of live with the alienness, you can then also realize, wow, this has profound things to say about things that I'm also thinking about in modernity, which might have to do with, this is about humans and technology, which, of course, we're always thinking about in terms of our own technology, but the Iliad is also about what can technology do and fail to do, that humans are dressed in all this high-tech armor, and yet it doesn't save us from mortality. It's also about celebrity. It's also about humans and nature and the end days. Those things are all both very familiar, even though they're in a very alien world.
Yeah. Rafi, how about you?
And this kind of follows on from what Emily was saying so well. You know, when postmodernists talk about our world, postmodernists such as Baudrillard, they talk about it as a world of pure surfaces with no depth, right? And that's true on so many levels, I think. It's a world where we've reduced everything to a bland surface, and we've reduced language to pure literality. I don't know if that word exists, but pure literalness. And in fact, and this is not accidental, it's deliberate. I mean, John Locke, who was one of the major bourgeois philosophers, you know, he made a distinction between figurative language, which is okay for poetry, but, you know, denotative language, clear and precise language is what we should use. And we've inherited this, right, Emily? This is how we teach composition. You know, it's the language of big business, of big corporations. And in doing that, we have lost something. You know, the Quran came from a medieval world. And when it says God is the light of the heavens and the earth, obviously it's not talking literally. And it says the light is a parable. And whether we're talking about medieval Islam or Christianity, their way of thinking was deeply allegorical, you know, and you see this in texts like St. Augustine's De Doctrina Christiana, you know, where he says the world of things is actually a world of signs. And then Bruce has written a lot about this in one of his books. But the world of signs is like the word of God. So like, as with the Logos, the Logos is not just the word of God, it's the rational order of creation itself. And so there's a kind of depth to everything, you know. which I think we have lost. We've lost that sense of wonder, that sense of mystery in the world. You know, the Romantics tried to bring it back, but of course it's there in the major religions as well.
Yeah.
The transcendence, if you like.
Yeah. So last question for me. So be thinking of your questions and line up if you'd like to. After such massive projects, what is next for each of you?
I'm doing a slightly less massive translation project, which is Ovid's Heroides, which I'm having a lot of fun with. It's very different style, and it's different to be doing couplets. It's different to be working with Latin, and it's fun to. So, for people who don't know, it's a collection of verse essays by the Roman poet Ovid, with mythological women writing to their horrible ex-boyfriends and terrible husbands and all that. And so it's fun, and it is sort of presented as it's very witty. And then I'm also doing a sort of fictionalized retelling of the myths that are in the background to the Homeric epics. So it's a different kind of writing as sort of linked short stories. Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
What about you, Rafi?
And I'll be very brief. I thought this was the end of a journey,
Okay.
and I now realize it's the beginning of a journey.
Yeah. Okay, let's start over here, and we'll just sort of
Perfect.
alternate. Oh, you may have to lift.
Move it up.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and I was wondering when you approach translating a classic text, which a lot of times has a lot of different variations, do you go in with, I know the story, this is the story I want to present, or do you kind of make a database or a collection of all the different versions of the story you're trying to tell, and kind of see what's in common?
I mean, I think this is maybe partly a question about textual transmission. I mean, in some cases, there are variant readings for the Iliad or the Odyssey. And if there's a significant variation in the textual tradition, is it that word or that word? I read a lot of commentaries. I sort of try to think through, am I going to go with a variant reading? So in most cases, I just use a particular modern edition and just go, because I'm not doing a complete re-edition of these poems, which would be a totally different and also challenging task. In some cases, I have gone with the variant reading. So for instance, in the beginning of the Iliad, we know that in antiquity, in some texts, it was oio noisi te pasi, to all the birds, like all the birds are going to eat the dead bodies. And in other readings, it's oio noisi te daita, it's the banquet for the birds. I think the second one is a more interesting reading, so I went with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's very easy to answer for me because Bruce, he knows all the translations. So whatever verse we're on, he will say, well, Abdul Halim says this, so-and-so says this. And so I didn't really have to think about it too much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think the Quran had been translated, about 70 versions of it by 20 nationalists. Few of them are by 20 people of national origins. Bangladesh, Indian, Egyptian, Iraqi, Saudi, one. Okay. Of all this, I have read a few of them. I found your translation is very poetic and eloquent and could be easily understood by wide variety of people in the Western world, as this audience has shown. It is clear and clarity. Almost like the one that a women author, Iranian women, Laila Bakhtiar has done. You know, her translation is also very clear, but your one is far better than her. I'm not an anti-feminist, but I'm just saying it. But the issue that I want to know, during my 50 years of stay in this country, we have been asked many times on many verses of Quran, which seems to be contentious. Seems to be, I do not agree with it. How you have addressed those contentious verses so that it can be shown to the humanity that what Quran says to the humanity and not to the women is equal and is just verse which all the believers, whether Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, the Quran's knowledge, book of knowledge applies to that. How do you have addressed those typical verses? I do not want to talk about it, but you know.
No. I appreciate the second part of your question, which proves that we did not pay you to say the first part. But yeah, I mean, there certainly are a number of verses in the Quran which have been cited by Islamic extremists or Islamophobes, usually out of context. And I think the answer to that, yes, look, in the Quran there are verses about war, right? There are verses about killing. But those verses are about a defensive war. You will never see in the Quran, go and ransack this village, or go and kill, 2,000 children, or go and kill women. You will never see that. You will only see, yes, when you are being attacked, when your homes are being taken away from you, when your women are being killed, then you have to defend yourself, right? So I think context plays a lot. I think context is most of the answer to that,
Okay, right here.
Hi, thank you very much for this wonderful talk. So I have an annoying double-barreled question because I wanted to ask Emily, since the Greek gods are themselves characters but are also these deontological or deological entities, do you view the Iliad or the Homeric poems as religious texts? And then my broader question is, in the work of translating, working with ancient religious texts, I didn't want to assume if you thought of them that way, how does the idea of translating God's words affect how you approach the project?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a religious text, or at least it was in antiquity, in the sense that these gods were really worshipped, and there were cult centers and practices of religion, worship of all of these gods that appear in the Iliad and the Odyssey. I mean, I mostly approached it just thinking I need to be totally respectful and take these characters seriously in their realm of ontology, including their divineness. And so I thought a lot about, and I talked already about making sure the characters' speech is differentiated from each other. In the case of the gods in the Iliad, I felt I also need to be thinking through how can I make it feel as real as possible that Poseidon's voice is as loud as mountains, or that Hera really can swoop across, go from land to sea in 3 strides. And then we need to be able to believe that. Whatever I can do with the English language to make you believe that, you should, while you're reading the poem, take it seriously and not think this is just a sort of cartoon character zipping around. And I need to not use cartoon language. I need to tell it straight so that you can feel the sublimity of the divine could be here.
And I would just say briefly that we just felt that we had to approach it with profound humility. And I'll just give you an example, actually. Emily is very famous for, in the Iliad, she translates the Greek word ulomenin as cataclysmic, which is very, very bold and, incredible. I'm not sure that we would be able to be that bold with the translation of the Quran, because if we were, we probably would get attacked from all kinds of sides, So we, in some ways, we were kind of very limited in what we had to do, because we just couldn't risk too much change,
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. And before you speak, let me just say, both writers are going to be signing in just a few minutes at on the expo floor in Hall DE. So we encourage you to join them there. And let's ask that question.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. The thing that I'm thinking about is like the absence of oral tradition, in modernity. What sort of cultural drivers do you think caused the absence of oral tradition, and what would it look like to revive an oral tradition in the modern day?
Wow, great question. Yes, do you want to answer that?
I can say something about that. Just because the culture that I come from, which is like Urdu speaking, it's still important in that culture for poetry to be read aloud. I know this is one of the things that Emily has emphasized a lot about the Iliad, about producing a translation that is kind of performative, right? As she performs it so well. But the same is true about the Quran. The Quran is never read silently. Even when people read it to themselves, they read it aloud. And they always listen to it aloud, and usually in a collective kind of environment. So I'm not sure that we could actually, I don't know what you think about this, whether we could actually revive orality now. But I think there are traditions like Urdu and Arabic where the oral tradition still thrives somewhat.
I mean, I do think that the Platonic myth that as soon as you have writing, it's going to destroy destroy people's memories.
Yeah.
I think there's something in that. I mean, once you've got all the technology for preserving words,
Yes.
we get hooked on the technology, and
Yeah.
we have this technology to preserve words. But we also have a lot of, I mean, we're not a purely reading things on either codecs or phones culture. I mean, we also have storytelling, we have poetry slams, we have audiobooks, we have podcasts, we have conversations with each other, ideally. I mean, I think we still do have really important social venues for oral storytelling and conversation. So it's not that we only have
Yes.
writing, we have all kinds of things.
Okay, so we're going to bring back the oral tradition.
Bring it back, yes.
Yes. These two have achieved something beautiful in bringing the ancient world here to us now. So I want to thank them both for being here. And please join them at the signing.
Thank you so much.